All right, so let us start with modern portfolio theory because we have done so far. Achha, have we done beta first of all? No, or yes? Have we classified systematic and unsystematic risk?
Sir, we have
हाँ
classified, but
तो
we have not done beta.
बीटा नहीं किया था
बीटा
इसको
बाकी है।
classify
हाँ,
करना।
तो पहले बीटा ले लेते हैं, उसके बाद फिर हम आगे बढ़ते हैं। राइट,
सर बुक में किधर होगा ये?
बुक तो मैं लेके बैठा ही हूँ, बट
Sir,
हाँ
page 145 है.
हाँ बस. So I'll just write down. Dakshish, you just keep on suggesting me different page numbers. This page number 145, green colored book. Right.
सर
And
मेरा पुराना वाला है काफी, तो मतलब क्या तो चैप्टर नेम या कुछ
हाँ वही रिस्क मेजरमेंट.
मेजरमेंट.
So 145 in new book, 171 in old book. Fine. Okay, so beta is like after P ratio, it happens to be one of the very popular measure in the market, right? And it is having what you can say quality of good interpretation. In a way, like it is much more interpretable. Like even a common man can easily interpret. So let us try to understand how does it go and how do we calculate it. So beta that is actually the regression part which we are going to study, but हम statistics से थोड़ा दूर रह के इसके logical part में ज़्यादा काम करते हैं. So beta or through beta we can measure systematic risk. Through beta we can measure systematic risk. Last time I think we segregated systematic unsystematic risk using correlation. R squared किया था नहीं किया था?
No, sir.
वो भी बाकी है. ठीक है, चलो. So आज हम systematic unsystematic risk measures दोनों ले लेते हैं. Fine. So beta is the measure of systematic risk, or through beta we can calculate systematic risk. Now beta is always measured against, right? It is always measured against market. Understand? Because market, why so? उसका reason है market is independent. Market is independent, which is mostly dependent on the external factors, wherein the stock or your portfolio, say portfolio or stock, is always dependent on the overall movement of the market. Right, so that's the intuition, and that has been the reason beta is always compared against the market index. We must have studied one regression line in our school days. Y is equal to a plus like bx. This has been the equation which we must have studied, wherein x is market return, beta is the slope of regression line. This is actually characteristic line. Y is equal to a plus bx is a characteristic line, and a is equal to regression constant, and y is equal to return on stock or portfolio. You can say return on stock or portfolio. Right, so this is the entire equation, that is y is equal to a plus bx, and wherein this slope is called beta. Right, so ये basic understanding हुई. बीटा कैलकुलेशन पे जाते हैं, बट उसके इंटरप्रिटेशन को पहले समझते हैं. नाउ बीटा कैन हैव सेवरल वैल्यूज, राइट? बीटा कैन बी मोर देन वन. तो उसका इंटरप्रिटेशन ऐसा हुआ because it is always measured against market index, remember well. So if market goes up by 10% and beta of a stock is equal to 1.2, then stock will move up by 12%. So it is faster than market. Of course, मैंने तो optimistic scenario लिया, that is increasing scenario, but yes, it can be disadvantages also to have higher beta in declining market. So when market is falling down, so stock might fall by 12% in this case. Okay, another we can say beta is less than 1. So once again, market is increasing by 10%, beta is 0.8, then stock will increase by 8%. Now, looking at this too, if it moves faster than market, we call it aggressive beta. If it is, say, moving slower than market, we call it defensive beta. Okay, now introduce one more, that is beta is equal to 1. So market is 10% beta is 1, then stock is 10%. So more often than not, you can catch this particular portion, not exactly in stocks, because stocks might have higher beta, right? It can be more than 2 as well for some of the companies, or index companies. But yes, one thing to be remembered, that if I am paying money to a mutual fund manager to manage a portfolio, and see, occasionally he's keeping a beta equals to 1 as a measure of risk management, that's okay, fine. So he's mapping me with the market. But if he consistently keeps on having a beta of exactly equal to 1, so he's keeping my portfolio uh, as sensitive as market, then I could have better taken an index fund. I'm unnecessarily paying money to my fund manager. So just considering beta, only considering beta. So we have to always check the consistency of a fund in terms of maintaining beta. So we can identify aggressive fund, a defensive fund. And of course, if fund manager is consistently maintaining beta of 1, then that is like quite disadvantageous. Now beta is equal to 0. So when market moves up by 10%, beta is 0, then stock तो नहीं, but जिसके साथ compare किया है, right, that will move by 0%. I'm not talking, but other asset which is under consideration, 0%. अब stock में तो ऐसा हो नहीं सकता है, like stock doesn't move, that is least likely. कुछ तो होगा. So beta 0 कब होगा? So when security under consideration is not a variable security. Security under consideration is not a variable security or fixed return, yes. So always remember that beta is compared with, means beta is a measure which finds out sensitivity against the market index. Sensitivity against the market index. So obviously, if I'm taking a fixed return security, then that is not serving the purpose. It will result beta to be 0. And at times, beta can also be negative, right? So when market is going up by 10% and beta, say for example, is -1, then this will fall by 10%. Inverse relationship. This can happen. This can happen. So if I'm finding out, say for example, a beta of gold with Sensex, then it could be negative. So beta negative is a good diversification strategy, right? So this is how we can interpret beta. These are the different beta values. So any confusion, any doubt so far? Clear है ना? Elementary है. Elementary है ना? So how do we measure beta? And then systematic and systematic risk के concept पे भी जाते हैं उसके बाद. Then model portfolio theory, because that is very important for exam. How do I calculate beta? So beta and covariance and correlation, in fact, they are siblings in a way. But हाँ, थोड़ा थोड़ा उसमें mathematical modifications है, and that is mostly for interpretational purpose. Say for example, पहले correlation पे काम करते हैं. So correlation के लिए मैंने ढूंढा covariance. Of course, when I'm on to the process of finding out beta, I'm comparing the same with market. So covariance of my stock with market divided by standard deviation of stock into standard deviation of market. And ये मेरी value आई 0.8, right? So I can say that is highly correlated. So my stock is highly correlated with market. But उससे ज़्यादा interpretation में क्या ले सकता हूँ? Can I say that way, if market is going up by 10%, how much is going to be movement in my stock? Possible है? Not possible. So correlation tells us like highly correlated, less correlated. जो covariance था वो तो सिर्फ movement ही दिखा रहा था, उससे उसको refine किया with correlation, but कहीं ना कहीं इसमें भी interpretational problems है. Means as an analyst or investor मैं इसको properly interpret अभी भी नहीं कर पाऊंगा. And so is the reason it is never displayed in mutual fund fact sheet. If it was so much interpretable and easy to understand for everybody, it would have found a place in fact sheets, but it's not there. ठीक है, तो अब बीटा को मैं थोड़ा modify कर रहा हूँ. I want to find out sensitivity of चेंजेस मींस चेंजेस जो हो रहे हैं स्टॉक के कंपेयर टू मार्केट अगेंस्ट ओनली मार्केट. सो कैलकुलेशन में थोड़ा सा मॉडिफिकेशन मारते हैं. दैट इज कोवेरिएंस ऑफ स्टॉक विथ मार्केट न्यूमरेटर रिमेन्स सेम. हाउएवर डिनोमिनेटर में मैंने क्या किया ओनली विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू मार्केट. सो स्टैंडर्ड डेविएशन ऑफ मार्केट एंड स्टैंडर्ड डेविएशन ऑफ मार्केट. That means covariance divided by variance of market. And that actually gives me sensitivity. Right? जो मैंने आगे नहीं लिखा था, but now we can easily understand that beta measures sensitivity, and that was well reflected here. And through beta, I can find out systematic risk. ठीक है? चलो यहाँ तक बीटा का इंट्रोडक्शन क्लियर हुआ आपको. कोरिलेशन इज डेफिनेटली गुड, बट कहीं ना कहीं इंटरप्रिटेशन बीटा से बेटर तो नहीं है उसका. चलो क्लियर विद दिस.
सर एक बार ये मेरे को सेंसिटिविटी वापस बताना.
सो यस, टू आंसर दक्षेश का क्वेश्चन कि जिसमें लाइक तो लेस देन 1 इज बेटर और नॉट. सी इट इज pretty subjective. Like when market is rising, I want beta to be higher. Like I want high beta stocks. And when market is falling down, right? So falling scenario mein, I want low beta stocks. Right? And high beta stocks mostly come from nowadays from banking, technology. ये सब high beta होते हैं. Wherein FMCG is usually perceived to be low beta stocks. है ना? ओके फिर हमारा जो यहाँ पर कंप्यूटेशन था उसको आगे बढ़ाते हैं. लेट अस स्टार्ट मेजरिंग risk, systematic risk and unsystematic risk. So one of the measure is R squared. So correlation उसका square में करता हूँ. So actually it is noted as R squared. It is also known as X mark. Right? So if you are evaluating mutual funds, generally आपको X mark ज़्यादा लिखा हुआ मिलेगा. Now what's the interpretation of it? So यहाँ पर 0.8 हमने लिखा हुआ है, उसी को square कर देते हैं. So 0.8 का squared that is equal to 0.64 or simply say 64%. This means 64% of the deviations are coming in a stock due to market. 64% of the risk on a stock is coming from market. So of the total risk, I can say 64% is due to market, so called systematic risk, and balance 36% is independent of market. That could be company specific, and that is called unsystematic risk. That is one way of finding out systematic and unsystematic risk of the total risk. Total risk is standard deviation square, that is variance of a stock. That is one way of doing it. And we can see beta and correlation are siblings. कोई ज़्यादा फर्क नहीं है. So there is one more way of doing it that is as good as beta square into variance of market. That is also one more way of solving it. अब ये दोनों में फर्क क्या पड़ेगा? It will give you percentage systematic risk. Right? It will give you percentage systematic risk. That means मान लो total risk मेरा 400 है percentage squared में, तो उसमें से 300 आया. Say for example 300 percentage squared is systematic risk. So सीधा ही आपको ये systematic risk number में दे देगा. Wherein when I'm using this method, it gives me proportion of systematic risk in the total risk. Right? So that is the only difference both these measures have. So are you clear with this? क्लियर है ना? मैं एक क्वेश्चन देता हूँ फिर. इफ दिस पार्ट इज डन, आई विल गिव यू अ क्वेश्चन. से फॉर एग्जांपल कोवेरिएंस ऑफ स्टॉक विथ मार्केट इज इक्वल टू, चलो 400 ही लेते हैं. 400. देन आई से स्टैंडर्ड डेविएशन ऑफ स्टॉक इज इक्वल टू 600 और से 625. इरेज कर देते. So let's make it easy to calculate. 625 and standard deviation of market is 225. right? Now this is squared, huh? This is squared, all squared, and covariance is also percentage squared. These are all percentage squared. All are variance forms. Now I am asking you to find out systematic risk. I'm asking you to find out systematic risk. तो सबसे पहले मुझे क्या ढूंढना पड़ेगा? बीटा. So beta is covariance divided by variance of market. So that means 400 divided by 225. Tell me, how much is it?
1.77.
1.77 is beta value, right? Now, let me find out systematic risk. Make sure you catch this computation precisely. Systematic risk is beta square into variance of market. Okay, so beta is 1.77 squared into, it's 225. Tell me.
So 398.25.
398.25.
नहीं नहीं नहीं, so square होगा ना? नहीं नहीं, wrong है सर.
711.11.
हाँ, मुझे वही डाउट लग रहा था बिकॉज मैंने हाइपोथेटिकल डेटा लिया ना, उसमें ये प्रॉब्लम होगा.
711.
711 आ रहा है ना? ठीक है. सो 711, और इसको मैं थोड़ा चेंज कर रहा हूँ फॉर लाइक बिकॉज वी हैव टेकन हाइपोथेटिकल डेटा. इसको मैं बढ़ा देता हूँ कि स्टॉक का वेरिएंस, बिकॉज हमने मार्केट को भी काफी अच्छा खासा रिस्की रखा हुआ है. ठीक है. सो नाउ दिस इज सिस्टमैटिक रिस्क. नाउ लेट मी फाइंड आउट अनसिस्टमैटिक रिस्क. सो टोटल रिस्क मेरा कितना है? सो 900. सिस्टमैटिक रिस्क कितना है? सो 711. सो अनसिस्टमैटिक रिस्क कितना आया?
189.
189. This is how I can segregate. However, the question is hypothetical. ये क्लियर हुआ? ध्रुव, क्लियर नाउ? हमने सीखा, उसको मैंने ये नंबर्स में प्रेजेंट किया, सो इट बिकम्स इजी फॉर अस टू आइडेंटिफाई. चलो अब हम इसको आगे बढ़ाते हैं एंड लेट्स सी द कोरिलेशन. सो व्हाट्स द कोरिलेशन बिटवीन टू स्टॉक्स? So that equation is covariance divided by standard deviation of stock into standard deviation of market. So covariance है हमारा 400. Standard deviation of stock मुझे चाहिए. यहाँ पर जो है वो variance है. So how much is the standard deviation of stock? Square root करना पड़ेगा ना?
सर 30 into 15 होगा.
So that is
450
into 15. That is equal to 450. 4 sorry, नीचे 450 है. Sorry. चलो बताओ. तो फाइनल आंसर
0.88.
0.88 is your correlation, right? Ab next we have is r squared. बताओ तो 0.88 का स्क्वायर.
0.79.
So 0.7744.
0.77 approximately करते हैं. Okay, so 77% is which risk? Systematic risk from the total risk. चलो तो मेरा total risk कितना है? 900. So total risk is equal to 900. उसमें systematic risk is 0.77. Tell me. वैसे तो आ जाना चाहिए, मैथमेटिकली ठीक ही होना चाहिए। स्टिल वी आर वर्किंग ऑन हाइपोथेटिकल डेटा, तो शायद लेट्स सी कितना आ रहा है 900 इंटू 0.77, वैसे तो आ ही जाएगा।
इट्स 693
हाँ, और 77 के पीछे कितना था?
7744 था।
हाँ, चलो तो इसको थोड़ा और बढ़ाओ आगे।
696 मतलब 697।
करेक्ट, एक मिनट। ये जो प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है दैट इज डेसिमल पॉइंट का प्रॉब्लम, दैट इज नॉट अ बिग इश्यू फॉर अस नाउ। ये एक्चुअल में 0.8888 है, तो आई कैन से 0.889 लेना चाहिए था।
तो वैसे तो बहुत बार 8 है, फिर एंड में जाके 9 है।
तो क्या वी कैन मैच टू दी
आप
लाइक थोड़ा एक्यूरेसी
800
कम चले जाते
800 आ सकता है अब।
हैं। 0.889, so that is 79 हो जा रहा है ये एक्चुअल में, this is getting 79 है ना, एंड
ये आ गया 711.1।
गया ना।
अगर हम सारे डेसिमल्स कंसिडर कर रहे हैं तो मतलब अगर हम 400 डिवाइड बाय 450 करेंगे तो 0.888 बहुत सारा 9 है, उसी को इनटू आंसर एग्जीक्यूट कर दो वापस कैलकुलेटर।
हाँ, हमको लाइक ये मैथमेटिकली प्रूफ करना था कि ये सेम ही आता है दोनों मेजर से, राइट, सो दे आर नॉट डिफरेंट फ्रॉम ईच अदर।
नहीं आ गया सर, अगर हम सारे डेसिमल्स कंसिडर करेंगे तो आएगा।
आएगा, 4 करोगे ना तो भी यू विल रीच ऑलमोस्ट टू द आइडेंटिकल लेवल, राइट। सो इसमें से थियोरेटिकल क्वेश्चंस भी होते हैं कई बार कि लाइक आर स्क्वायर्ड मेजर क्या करता है, सो यू कैन से प्रपोर्शन ऑफ रिस्क एक्सप्लेन्ड बाय मार्केट, या तो आप ये भी समझ सकते हो कि ऑफ द टोटल रिटर्न हाउ मच रिटर्न हैज बीन ड्यू टू मार्केट, दैट इज आल्सो इंडिकेटेड बाय आर स्क्वायर्ड। फिर से बताता हूँ, हमने तो यहाँ पर रिस्क के एंगल से ही दिया कि राइट ऑफ द टोटल रिस्क हाउ मच रिस्क इज ड्यू टू मार्केट, बट रिटर्न्स को भी सिमिलरली हम इंटरप्रेट कर सकते हैं दैट हाउ मच रिटर्न ऑफ अ पोर्टफोलियो और स्टॉक इज ड्यू टू मार्केट। सो मार्केट चला है इसलिए आपका स्टॉक चला है, उसका लाइक वो proportion क्या है, that can also be measured using the same thing. Clear? Is this? चलो, should you have any question, let me know. जल्दी. Nothing understandable to all of us. We have to start with modern portfolio theory. Right? Some of the very important authors in this world, Nobel laureates, certainly. One is Harry Markowitz, we know, and another is William Sharpe. These are the two people who worked a lot on this theory. और उसके बाद ये सब चीज़ों को बहुत ही ज़्यादा विद टाइम लोगों ने मॉडिफाई भी किया, राइट। सो इट्स एंडलेस जर्नी, बट हमें वो सीख लेनी है, दैट इज कैपिटल मार्केट लाइन, राइट, CML एंड SML। ये दो जो थियोरी है विच आर very important, very much important in our examination from theoretical angle. Obviously SML तो अभी क्या है कि लाइक इतने टाइम में आप इतना सीख चुके हो, RF प्लस बीटा इंटू RM माइनस RF, तो उसके न्यूमेरिकल्स तो आएंगे तो आप सॉल्व कर लोगे। आई डोंट हैव टू से दैट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, डू इट, वो तो आप कर ही लोगे। बट हाँ, कुछ थियोरिटिकल पोर्शन जो हम CFP में सीखे थे उसको रिवाइज कर लेते, लेट अस रिफ्रेश ऑल दोस थिंग्स। Okay, so modern portfolio theory, and we are talking about the Markowitz part initially. So first component which we have is relevant risk. First component which we have is called relevant risk. Now I can ask all of you to recollect that example. Standard deviation of coffee is 10%. right? I am just going to the old example, and standard deviation of ice cream is equal to 10%. But yes, individually they are risky. But when I create a portfolio of it, so मेरे portfolio का standard deviation कितना हो गया था? That happened to be 0. You remember it, right? So relevant risk essentially talking about this particular part. The individual security or individual asset may be risky, but as an investor, I would always look at the impact it has on my portfolio. Impact it has on my portfolio. कि एक सिक्योरिटी आने से मेरे पोर्टफोलियो के रिस्क पे क्या चेंज होगा, एक सिक्योरिटी को लाइक बाहर निकालने से पोर्टफोलियो में से लाइक मेरे रिस्क पे क्या इम्पैक्ट आएगी. दैट्स व्हाट आई एम गोइंग टू कैप्चर एज एन इन्वेस्टर. एंड सिंपली आई वुड से गोल्ड इज रिस्की, इक्विटी इज रिस्की, बट व्हेन आई कंबाइन बोथ it mostly reduces my portfolio risk. So I'm interested in my portfolio risk, right? So before I add a security or delete the security, I certainly look at individual securities risk and return profile, but I would best be looking at the impact it would have on my portfolio if it is added or it is deleted. That is called relevant risk. Barabar? Is that clear? ये definition clear हुई? Move further.
Yes, sir.
Next point suggested is efficient frontier. That is efficient frontier. Now Markowitz theory में एक simply उन्होंने जो identify किया था, चलो मैं कि this is expected return of portfolios, not of individual stock. That is the essential difference between, right, CML and SML part. Expected return on portfolio and standard deviation of portfolio. This is what I am going to look at. So अब market में तो बहुत ज़्यादा number of portfolios होते हैं, right? So whatever number of portfolios accessible to us, उसको हम यहाँ पर risk return profile के हिसाब से plot करते हैं, right? So let me plot when that was huge, means large number of portfolios that would come. अब यहाँ पर at a particular risk जो portfolio मुझे best return दे रहा है, right? At a different level of risk जो portfolio मुझे best return दे रहा है, it looks like a cartoon. In fact, I can draw like this. ठीक है. So जो portfolio मुझे best return दे रहा है, उसको हम क्या बताते हैं? These are called efficient portfolio, right? These are called efficient portfolio. एंड अब ये जो एफिशिएंट पोर्टफोलियो है उसको कनेक्ट करके, ये सब पोर्टफोलियो को कनेक्ट करके एक मैं लाइन ड्रॉ करता हूं, which is set of all efficient portfolios, which connects all efficient portfolio is known as efficient frontier. बराबर, ये कॉन्सेप्ट क्लियर हुआ? So I've got all the different portfolios said to be efficient portfolio, वो पहले आइडेंटिफाई किए. Now efficient portfolio is the one which gives you best return at a given level of risk, right? Or say lowest risk to get a return, है ना? So मैं इसको like vertically देख रहा हूँ, तो horizontally भी देख सकता हूँ ना, that is possible, but that is efficient portfolio. Clear so far? Any doubt, any confusion? Now there is a question from my side कि अब ये जो efficient frontier है वो static line है या dynamic line है?
It keeps on changing.
It keeps on changing because market में expected returns change होते जाते हैं. So different portfolios which might come in with a different expected risk return profile. So this line will keep going up, coming down. But one thing is very clear: if a portfolio which comes out or happens to be which is having better return than efficient frontier expected to be, तो efficient frontier ऊपर चला जाएगा, right? efficient frontier will move up. And similarly, the portfolios which I identified to be with certain level of return all fell down, then efficient frontier might come down, right? So it's a dynamic line. But yes, one thing is pretty clear, that you cannot have a portfolio which is above efficient frontier line. It will be on efficient frontier line if it is the best. So above efficient frontier line portfolios are desirable, they are not available. Below efficient frontier line portfolios are available, but would you invest in? Answer is no. राइट, तो ये उनका एफिशिएंट फ्रंटियर का कॉन्सेप्ट हुआ. क्लियर? चलो आगे बढ़े. लाइक तो सम क्वेश्चन. अब हम कुछ इन्वेस्टर्स को आइडेंटिफाई करते हैं. सो फर्स्ट आई हैव गॉट रिस्क एवर्स. राइट, आप ये 3 तरह के इन्वेस्टर्स को आइडेंटिफाई करोगे. रिस्क एवर्स, रिस्क न्यूट्रल, and another is risk seeker. These are the 3 types of investors should you try to identify. बताओ मुझे who is right. So risk averse investors are those investors who like their capital and they will always stay away from high risk reward deals, who choose to preserve their capital. अब इसमें भी 2 तरह के लोग होते हैं. highly risk averse means risk averse का मीनिंग ऐसा नहीं है कि they will always make FD, but they will take very lower risk because they want to preserve their capital. And इसमें highly risk averse and less risk averse कि capital preserve करनी है but थोड़ा बहुत अगर adequate return available है तो they keep on taking the risk. अच्छा, what is the concept of risk neutral? Risk neutral investors are those investors which are actually not impacted by risk. Right? So these are the people who evaluate, those who evaluate investment alternatives, or simply say investments solely on gains. Right? Risk देखने का उनको फुर्सत नहीं है, and they don't like to. And yes, we mostly fall into risk neutral characteristic, you know, right? Those who are studying this, who are in the classroom, right? Certainly they are not risk averse. Right? I'm talking about our classroom because हमको अच्छा stock चाहिए. Infosys good company, just get into it. Like, did we ever check the standard deviation? कुछ नहीं ना, right? So we are interested only in potential gains, and we are not affected by the risk profile of the company. There is one more way to look at it, is that like having invested in some stocks, say Infosys, like अभी तो buyback announce करके काफी talk of the town में आ चुका है, तो Infosys का share, so I'm having it, and say for example Infosys moves up by 300 rupees tomorrow, what would I do? Nothing. If it falls down by 200 rupees, what would I do? Nothing. So that means my investment decisions are not impacted by risk. So I'm risk neutral. So over a shorter period of time, but most of us would happen to be risk neutral, right or not?
Yes, sir.
And another is risk seeker. ये बहुत, like in the our land actually, you'll find out most people who are risk seeker. IPO में सट्टा मारते हैं, स्टॉक में सट्टा मारते हैं, डेरिवेटिव्स में मारते हैं. ये लोग ऐसा है कि हम या तो बेंटली में घूमेंगे या तो साइकिल पे घूमेंगे. Right, so they are actually willing to take any bet which is like giving some opportunity to make money. So they are risk seeker, and they are absolutely okay if their capital is wiped out. ठीक है, so these are the different types of investors. आगे बढ़ते हैं, फिर से theory क्या है. So what he said that if all investors are risk averse. Now, all investors are rational investors. सबसे पहले. Now, who is this fellow? Who is rational investor? Is a risk neutral rational investor? Is a risk seeker rational investor? What do you say?
सब्जेक्टिव है सर, ये तो काफी सबके अपनी अपनी डेफिनेशन होगी.
But हाँ, हम academic definition rational की लाए तो दिमाग से सोचने वाले हैं. right? So they will always get into those deals की जहां पर उनको adequate return मिलती है for the risk taken, right? So why are we not investing all our money in stock market at this moment? Because कहीं ना कहीं हमें ये तो पता है ना कि like there is no adequate return available at this point. This is not the right time to get into the stock market. गलत भी हो सकता है बहुत बार मुझे लगता है ना, like I think rationally and I'm always opposite than the market in terms of my expectations. ऐसे ही चलता है. When I say that market will fall down तो वो तो और जोर से ऊपर चढ़ता है. So fact is that कि rational investors are those investors who will invest. I'm not saying they don't like to take risk. They will take risk only if there is adequate return available. If there is no adequate return available, they will stay away from such investments. They are called rational investors. So all investors are rational investors. Then their selection would depend on their risk aversion, right? So their selection would depend on risk aversion. Now risk aversion में दो मैंने classify किए ऊपर देखो, high or less. So if somebody is highly risk averse, तो efficient frontier जो हमने draw किया था उसके ये side में invest करेंगे, lower side. So they will take lesser risk and they'll be happy with lower returns. And those who are less risk averse, in the efficient frontier line, they will go this side, right? So ठीक है, थोड़ा risk तो लेना ही पड़ता है to make the returns. वो sentence believe करते हैं higher risk higher return, वो तो actually में seeker का है. ठीक है. So selection depends on risk aversion of an investor, right? Move further. And if investors are also allowed to borrow, ये बहुत important and critical assumption है. If investors are allowed to borrow and invest at risk-free rate, right? This has been very critical assumption which is forming part of this theory. यहाँ तक clear है सबको? All set, settled है ना? Means there's nothing like heavy or some hammering on your head, not that way. ठीक है, आगे बढ़ते हैं. तो अब जो हम बनाएंगे, right? So that is going to be very interesting. Investors can invest at risk-free rate. That is you and me, everybody can do it. But other part of it, that is like we are also allowed to borrow at risk-free rate. That is pretty difficult assumption in real life. But हाँ, उनकी theory में जो बताया था उसको हम और आगे बढ़ाते हैं. So what he said, फिर से हम बताते हैं, like expected return on portfolio and standard deviation of portfolio. These are the two things. If I take no risk, understandably, if I take no risk, my return is not zero. I would still be earning something that is called risk-free rate. Now, what he says, कि पहले मैं draw कर लेता हूँ, फिर मैं आपको समझाता हूँ. This is okay. And yes, अब मैं efficient frontier draw कर देता हूँ. ये सबसे मुश्किल काम होता है मेरे लिए draw करना. ठीक है, चलो, that's okay. Okay, so now what has been done कि मेरे पास अभी ready क्या है? This is the efficient frontier ready with me. Now since all these people have been economists, तो definitely जो indifference curve वाला concept था, वही concept उन्होंने introduce किया. And what has been said? कि see, this is risk-free return, right? And I'm drawing a line which is tangent to efficient frontier. I'm just writing that word, tangent to efficient frontier. Tangency का point क्या होता है? So just explain, elaborate, what is tangency? See, दो point होते हैं, intersection and tangent. Tell me what is tangent.
Tangent is basically सिर्फ उस एक point पर touch होकर निकल जाता है. Intersection में like it's properly crossing the thing.
Right. तो जो आर पार निकल जाता है उसको हम intersection बताते हैं. You're right. ठीक है. So ये tangency point है. So indifference point की concept से ही चलते हैं. So this is considered as M. But this is not Markowitz, it is market portfolio. Now, ये हमने ड्रॉ तो किया, बट फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल मार्केट पोर्टफोलियो is a portfolio which comprises of all the asset classes which are present in the market, that too at their optimum combination. So इसका मीनिंग ऐसा हुआ कि M which I am writing here actually doesn't exist. It is a hypothetical portfolio called market portfolio, right? So अब ये theory को आगे बढ़ाते हैं. So tangency point, it is the only point which is giving you the best risk reward proposition. I can also interpret that way that tangency point is the point. This is the only portfolio which is compensating you for the risk taken. Can I say that? Yes. So this is how it goes. तो चलो इसके कुछ credentials हम लिख देते हैं. So this portfolio has expected return of 12% and standard deviation of 15%. Across all my recordings, I've kept the same rates. तो कोई भी वीडियो सुनोगे तो आपको यही rates देखने मिलेंगे. Fine. So now this is the portfolio which is having 12% return and 15% standard deviation. Okay, going back. If there is an investor who wants to take 10% risk, what should he do? Now he's in a dilemma. कि क्या करना चाहिए? If he picks up efficient portfolio, so efficient portfolio, when we introduced, we said that it is that portfolio which is giving you best return at a given level of risk. But we did never say that it is the portfolio which is giving you adequate return at a given level of risk. So I could identify an efficient portfolio, but yes, this is the line which indicates adequate return. Okay, now I introduce one more definition, that is like आगे हमने पढ़ा कि like investors can invest at risk-free rate. ये हमने पढ़ा. And there is one more definition which we read, that is called a relevant risk. What is that relevant risk? Relevant risk, once again, is the portfolio risk, not the individual assets risk. तो अब individual investor क्या करेंगे कि market में सिर्फ एक ही portfolio है which is compensating for the risk taken. So let me invest in that portfolio only. But that is having higher risk than what I want to take. So not an issue. I'll combine two asset classes because relevant risk is once again portfolio risk. So I'll combine two asset classes. One is market portfolio. Another is risk-free. ये दोनों को combine करके I'll arrive at my own combination, which is taking me to that adequate level. कैसे? See this. So variance of portfolio का equation रखते हैं. So how to find out variance of portfolio? So variance of market into weight of market squared plus variance of risk-free into weight of risk-free squared plus 2 covariance वाला equation आएगा. ठीक है? So that's okay. अब मुझे ये बताओ कि रिस्क फ्री और मार्केट ये दोनों के बीच में कोवेरिएंस होगा या नहीं होगा? What is your take on that? What is the covariance between risk free asset and market portfolio? Tell me. We have got an answer. So let's see. Yeah, Dhruv is right. चलो और कोई? रोहन? Something. बेसिक है ना? सी मार्केट पोर्टफोलियो है, वो रिस्की है. And risk free is fixed in a way. That has been the reason it is risk free. So I've got one variable asset class, another is fixed asset class. What can be the covariance between two? Lakshesh? Kunal bhai? Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't hear.
सर नहीं होना चाहिए.
हाँ, नहीं होना चाहिए. That's true. Lakshesh, what's your answer?
सर मैंने क्वेश्चन नहीं सुना, इंटरनेट कनेक्शन प्रॉब्लम हो रहा था.
Okay, no problem, no problem. See, I'll guide you once again. कि I have asked the covariance between risk-free investment and market portfolio. मैं दो जगह पर इन्वेस्ट कर रहा हूँ ना, market and risk-free. सो ये दोनों के बीच का कोवेरियंस क्या होना चाहिए? यस, व्हाट इज योर आंसर?
कोवेरियंस होगा ही नहीं बिकॉज दोनों अलग अलग ही हैं।
राइट, सो एक में चेंज होने से दूसरे में चेंज नहीं होने वाला है, सो कोवेरियंस इज 0। तो दैट मींस अब मैं क्या कर रहा हूँ कि ये पार्ट अब मेरे इक्वेशन में नहीं होगा बिकॉज दैट्स 0। अच्छा, व्हाट इज द स्टैंडर्ड डेविएशन ऑफ रिस्क फ्री? व्हाट्स द स्टैंडर्ड डेविएशन ऑफ रिस्क फ्री एसेट्स?
ये भी जीरो ही
सर
होगा,
स्टैंडर्ड डिवीजन भी नहीं होगा।
हाँ
कंसिडरेशन है ही नहीं।
हाँ, ये ना वो अटेंशन लोगों का मैं चेक कर लेता हूँ इसमें, इतना हैवी टॉपिक है, राइट? दिस प्रॉब्ली लाइक वन ऑफ द दिमाग खा जाए ऐसा टॉपिक है। और इसमें लाइक व्हेन आई ऑल ऑफ अ सडन बाउंस ऑफ दिस क्वेश्चन, व्हाट्स द स्टैंडर्ड डिवीजन ऑफ रिस्क फ्री, होगा होगा होगा, बट नहीं है। दैट इज बाय डेफिनेशन रिस्क फ्री मींस रिस्क फ्री, राइट? फाइन, सो मेरे पास जो इक्वेशन बचा इतना ही बचा है एंड आई हैव टू सॉल्व दिस इक्वेशन नाउ। लेट्स सी। सो वेरिएंस ऑफ पोर्टफोलियो टारगेट इज 100, variance of market is 15 squared. So I'm straight away writing 225. Weight of market squared. Solve WM. बताओ, चलो 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 चलो। What we found is 0.67, है ना? So weight in market portfolio is 0.67, or say 2/3 amount should be invested in market. चलो तो भी रिस्क फ्री में कितना करेंगे? सो वेट ऑफ रिस्क फ्री इज 0.33. नाउ लेट अस फाइंड आउट रिटर्न ऑन पोर्टफोलियो इन दैट केस। रिस्क फ्री हम 6% डाल देते हैं। सो रिटर्न ऑन पोर्टफोलियो 0.67 इंटू कितना होगा? 12, है ना? प्लस 0.33 इंटू 6, 9 and 3. So that should be, sorry, हाँ कितना आ रहा है?
10.02।
So approximately it is 10%. Fine, fine. So ये investor ने क्या किया? He has created his own portfolio, which is giving 10%, which is a combination of market and risk-free investments. Similar things would be done by many more investors. What do you say? सब लोग यही करना शुरू करेंगे ना? They will now skip all these efficient portfolios and they will start investing, or say they will start combining market and risk free in such a manner that they all reach to this level, right or not? अच्छा, एक पॉइंट है, मैं अभी थोड़ी देर के बाद बता रहा हूँ, probably it might confuse. And when I'm investing like all my money in market portfolio, my risk is 15%. True. When I'm once again repeating, when I'm investing all my money in market portfolio, that is my risk is 15%. Now, say for example, somebody wants to take a risk of 20%. What should he do? Tell me. Somebody wants to take a risk of 20%. What should he do? तो बस यहाँ पर डालो इक्वेशन में। So I'll say 400 is equal to 225 into weight of market squared. सीधा अब मुझे बताओ weight of market. So what happens is कि 1.33 मार्केट में कैसे आया? So इसका मीनिंग ऐसा हुआ, like I'm investing 1.33 in market, the weight of risk free is equal to minus 0.33. That means I'm borrowing money at risk free rate and investing in market, because ये theory में हमने आगे ये भी देखा था that investors are allowed to borrow and invest at risk free rate, so why can't he borrow? तो अब क्या करेगा? He looked at a portfolio which was on efficient frontier line, but yes, adequate return वाला तो यहाँ पर है. So these people will start creating a different set of portfolios. इस तरह से portfolio बनते जाएंगे. And yes, we studied an interesting and classical concept that if a portfolio which is above the efficient frontier line, expected return above the efficient frontier line, then efficient frontier line is not a static line, it is a dynamic line, isn't it? तो होगा क्या फाइनली कि ये मेरी एफिशिएंट फ्रंटियर लाइन जो कर्व है वो गया, कर्व हैज गॉन, and this line becomes my new efficient frontier line, which indicates the adequate return at a given level of risk, and this line is known as capital market line. This is how we derive at capital market line. So all portfolios here would have market portfolio in it. Market portfolio in it. And see, everywhere this is market, and it is an efficient frontier, isn't it? It's an efficient frontier. So this line is also a dynamic line. And one more, all the portfolios on this line tend to have which risk? Systematic risk. Because I'm not using any other asset, I'm using only market portfolio. Again, so standard deviation of portfolio and expected return relationship is well explained by CML. अच्छा, अब इसमें और एक important point मैं आपको बताता हूँ, थोड़ा मैं नीचे से लिखता हूँ, so let me write this way कि ये जो segment हमने बनाया, right? So typically talking about this particular segment is called lending portfolios. These are called lending portfolios because we are investing at risk free, and all these portfolios above this are known as borrowing portfolio. Correct? Is it true? Clear सबको? Is it okay? Set है ना?
Yes, sir.
Let's move further and find out the expected return or required return equation using CML. So required return using this particular line is, see, when I'm talking about required return, it is always function of two things. That is risk-free rate plus risk premium. And as I said, whatever theory you study, यही दो component होते हैं. So it is risk-free rate plus standard deviation of portfolio divided by standard deviation of market into RM minus RF. This is the equation of CML, right? So when investor wants to take only systematic risk, no unsystematic risk, then this is what we should get. Clear with this? All clear? चलो इसको प्रूव करके भी देखते हैं. Yeah, like I want to take 20% risk, then how does it go? ऊपर लिखता हूँ. So risk rate हमने 6% रखा है. पोर्टफोलियो का रिस्क मुझे 20% चाहिए, एंड मार्केट का रिस्क कितना है? 15%. रिटर्न ऑन मार्केट इज 12 एंड रिस्क फ्री 6. लेट्स सॉल्व दिस इक्वेशन. टेल मी हाउ मच वैल्यू डू यू अराइव विथ?
10.5.
कितना आया? सॉरी,
10.5.
No, it cannot be 10.5. It should be different.
$14, sir.
That's correct. So 8 plus 6, that is equal to 14. So this is equal to 14%. So जो हमने ये 20% वाला बनाया था, that had a return of 14%. Correct. Clear. All set. चलो कुछ कंफ्यूजन? भारी भरकम टॉपिक था, तो कंफ्यूजन तो होने चाहिए. बताओ. क्लियर है ना यहाँ तक?
सर तो अगर रियल लाइफ सिनेरियो में बोल सकते हैं कि जो गवर्नमेंट
Now, using the concept of CML, we have had the first asset pricing model derived at. Asset pricing model, which tries to identify what is the uh, reward should you get for taking a risk and how much should be the risk in a particular asset. Based on it, it is trying to find out some pricing of the asset, like undervaluation, overvaluation. वो CML में नहीं होता है, SML में होता है. Now, capital asset pricing model is open-ended. So like CML हमने किया, तो that was essentially talking about portfolios. There was no scope of individual security there. But यहाँ पर yes, I can use individual securities. It is using one common factor as the measure of systematic risk, that is beta, that is nothing but market risk is equal to systematic risk. That is what has been suggested in this, and this theory is better known as capital asset pricing model. So नाम बहुत ही clear है कि it is a capital asset pricing model, and yes, given by William Sharpe, and as he said कि like at equilibrium, पहले लिखता हूँ, at equilibrium your required rate of return is equal to expected return from the asset. So this leads to fair valuation. If there is a deviation from it, then certainly we can say there is undervaluation and overvaluation. Now, as per this theory, required rate of return is equal to, once again, risk-free rate plus risk premium. So there is no change as far as the basic equations are concerned. Right. अब उन्होंने जो theory बनाई, which is like more interpretative once again and popular also in the market. Like, so if you are like in the first year of BCom or studying elementary finance, तो भी equation सिखा दिया जाता है. Like at least इतना तो रट दिया जाता है कि like RF plus beta into RF minus RF, ये आप याद रख लो, एग्जाम में काम लगेगा. Okay, so what is the concept there? अब यहाँ पर expected return on securities and or asset, and यहाँ पर अब क्या है, beta as a measure. Now once again beta is 0, that means now throughout the period my risk free return has to remain same, it has to remain constant, but what keeps on changing there is the risk premium. So this line indicates risk premium. Connection was slightly weaker. Fine. So this line indicates risk premium. Now see, if beta is equal to 1, so that is market portfolio, so it should have this much required rate of return. And this section indicates risk premium. So if a security has a lower beta, say beta is equal to 0.5, it should have a required return somewhere here. If it is having beta more than 1, say 1.5, then it should have the required rate of return here. And this component is risk premium. I'll tell you how risk premium is to be calculated here. चलो अब हम शुरू करते हैं. Tell me return on market minus risk free rate. What does it tell us? ये risk premium है, but ये कौन सा risk premium है? Because I'm comparing with which return? Market return. So market return minus risk-free rate, that gives me the risk premium related to market. I can also call it market premium. Now, if I want to like use the same number to arrive at the stock premium, so I know there is something called beta. Beta measures what? Sensitivity with market. So I'm using the same sensitivity. So see, RM and multiplied with beta, that becomes the stock beta. So now what do I do is beta into RM minus RF. So when beta is multiplied with market premium, it gives me security or asset risk premium. Correct? And ये जो section है, it indicates the same risk premium. Clear? So as per his theory, required rate of return is now RF plus beta into RM minus RF. This is the equation to find out required rate of return. Clear? Now, यहाँ पर तो this is not an efficient frontier line, first of all. So I'll just name this line. This line is known as security market line. First of all, which indicates required rate of return at a given level of risk. Now, portfolios on this line may or may not have systematic risk. And you can have, this is not an efficient frontier once again, so you can certainly have securities which are likely to have an expected return more than the required rate of return. So say for example, I'm talking about fine. So let's move further and see this key. Like if I was talking about like beta slightly higher hai, so required return itna hai, and security is expected to give us a return which is more than required return. Tell me, this difference is known as? बताओ तो. Sure.
Sir, risk premium?
No. This is required rate of return and this is expected return. Difference between two. See, risk premium to yahan tak hai. This is risk premium. Now expected return and required rate of return. Right? So expected return minus required rate of return is actually known as Jensen's alpha. है ना?
Yes, sir.
So अगर right, the security ये positive alpha है, right? And if I change, like there is a security somewhere here, should give a required return here, but expected return कम है उससे. So this is also alpha, but negative alpha है. So conclusion says that a positive alpha, that means the security is undervalued. Right? So I can say it is undervalued. And another is negative alpha, that means security is overvalued. So undervalued, that means it is not actually, as per the equation, ये दोनों same हो जाना चाहिए. So security is giving us a return which is more than required. That means it is available at a lesser price. So price should increase in such a manner that expected return should be equal to required rate of return. That's the equilibrium concept he suggested. So this security is as of now undervalued. So buy it, market will correct it, and you should make money out of it. And if security is having a return, expected return lesser than the required, that means already the security priced very high. So its price should fall down so that your return matches. So it is overvalued security. This is how you can work on Jensen's alpha. बराबर, ये बहुत ही ज़्यादा important है एग्जाम के लिए, and we have been solving it from investment planning time, right? So बहुत ज़्यादा important है. We'll solve some questions as well. अब next measure मैं जो ले रहा हूँ, that is called trainer's measure. He came first, so of course we should take his opinion first. We are on the process of finding out risk-adjusted performance. So the concept here remains same. Like return on portfolio minus risk-free rate. So this difference is actually known as excess return above the risk-free rate, or I can also call this return as risky return because it is above risk-free rate. Now what he says, like if I want to rank some of the portfolios based on their risk return profile, so कैसे करेंगे? So he gave us the first theory of this particular comparison. He said that he had a valid opinion. I read in a book कि since we are creating a portfolio, so portfolio has two risk in a way, like so systematic and unsystematic. But when you create a portfolio, essentially you try to reduce unsystematic risk, and that is the reason behind creating a portfolio, that you reduce the risk and you still get the desired return. But that has been the reason he took beta as a measure of systematic risk. So he said कि आपका जो excess return है, risk premium है, return on portfolio minus risk free rate, right, divided by beta, that should give you the trainer's ratio. Now what should you be doing with this ratio? It's pretty simple. That I've got 5 mutual funds or portfolios to be ranked, या selection करना है. So of course the portfolio which is having higher ratio considered better, right? And the lower ratio should be discarded from the selection list. So it is essentially used to rank the portfolios. In just a year time, we have had William Sharpe, who released his working on it, and his working is better in terms of interpretation. Once again, he said, like we write this William Sharpe's measure, once again working on the same aspect, that return on portfolio minus risk rates. He kept the numerator same, but he introduced standard deviation of the portfolio. Now what's the intuition behind? Intuition is very simple. Ki, like most portfolios which are there in the market, if they have a risk which is equal to systematic risk, all the portfolios in the market have risk which is equal to systematic risk, how would they perform? So once you take market risk, your return should also be equal to market, right or not? So that has been the reason. उन्होंने बताया कि नहीं, रियल लाइफ में पोर्टफोलियो मैनेजर्स अनसिस्टमैटिक रिस्क भी अज्यूम करते हैं टू गेट दैट एक्स्ट्रा रिटर्न. बाकी तो मैं मार्केट रिटर्न ही लाके देता हूँ आपके पैसों पे, तो व्हाई वुड यू पे मी? यू वुड बेटर बी बाइंग सम ETFs and investing your money at a cheapest possible cost. You are paying me money to generate that extra return. So by taking systematic risk, I cannot beat the market indices. So I have to take unsystematic risk. So most portfolios in real life have both the risk, systematic as well as unsystematic. So that's the reason this became so popular. Okay, even in, like, what you can say, in most mutual funds fact sheet, you still find out Sharpe's ratio because it has got interpretational element. So once again, it is higher is better. So both the equations to be remembered by you. Once again, purpose has been same, only denominator has changed, and this is actually, this change in denominator has made it more useful. Now one more follower of Sharpe. Like when Sharpe can refine Trenor's ratio, then certainly there should be somebody who can refine Sharpe's ratio. So then there came Sortino ratio. This isn't tested much in exam. However, it is written in our book, L1 book. Now, Sortino ratio, he said that return on portfolio minus risk rate divided by semi-deviation. Deviation says that, see, while finding out standard deviation, I got a message actually. What is semi-deviation? So in the process of standard deviation, what do I do? Return माइनस एक्सपेक्टेड रिटर्न जो है हमारा, राइट, उसमें दोनों चीजें हम लेते हैं, राइट. सो यहाँ पर पॉजिटिव है, नेगेटिव है, नेगेटिव है, पॉजिटिव है, फिर उसको क्या करते हैं हम, रिटर्न माइनस एक्सपेक्टेड रिटर्न स्क्वायर करके उसको वी मेक ऑल कंपैरेबल. रिटर्न मिल रहा है, तो इज दैट अ रिस्क टू मी? एक्चुअली नो, my risk comes in when I'm getting a return which is lesser than what is my expected return. So he refined, while finding standard deviation, I should eliminate all the positive deviations. I should eliminate all the positive deviations and should only consider negative deviations, and rest process goes on as we did. जो करते हैं वैसे ही चलेगा, but only thing is that I ignore all the positive deviations and consider negative deviations. So होता क्या है कि मुझे करेक्ट पिक्चर मिलता है. आई एम गेटिंग द better measure compared to typical Sharpe's measure, because I'm actually only and only considering those returns events which have had a return which is lesser than my average return. So this is how we refine, but it is not tested in examination. It is just for, it is there in our books, so ये आपको बता दिया मैंने. Then we have one more thing which came in of late, that was called M squared. So that is Modigliani and his granddaughter created one more measure that is called M squared. वो भी यही है कि like it is Sharpe's ratio has some errors and refinement went on. But yes, we stopped up to Sharpe's ratio only. Sharpe, Trainer and Jensen's alpha. They have been all-time favorite of examiner. Right? And चलो मैं फटाफट एक क्वेश्चन कर लेते हैं before we wind up. Then we have to start studying from the book different portfolio management strategies, which shall take half an hour, and then we have to start with derivatives, right? That is very important. So don't worry about number of chapters which we have been progressing with, because we are working on those topics which are heavily important in examination. So without these topics, if you go to exam, you can never pass. And one more is derivative. That will also, that is going to eat up your mind. I don't know how much time it will take, but आपका दिमाग खाली करेंगे, that is for sure. चलो, say that we have got three funds, A, B, and C, and standard deviation. Standard deviation होने के लिए return लेते हैं पहले. चलो, so let us take expected returns from the fund. म्यूचुअल फंड की बात करें तो एक्सपेक्टेड भी नहीं होता है, actual return ही होता है. So I'll say returns of the fund. This fund has given 15% return, this has given 14, and the another fund has given we say 13% return. Standard deviation of the fund has been this has got a standard deviation of 20, this का है 18, and this has got 18 once again. Beta of the fund is 1.2. Right, it is 1.1, and this is also say 1.3. So ऐसे रखते हैं. Now, a return on market is equal to 12%. Risk-free rate is equal to 6%. Rank the portfolios using सबसे पहले trainers ratio आप ढूंढो, उसके बाद Sharpe's ratio भी ढूंढो, and then we'll find out in common alpha to conclude the class. So start finding out trainers ratio and let me know all the values. Look at the working. हमने किया trainers ratio का equation किया, return on portfolio minus risk rate divided by beta. We found it and we have ranked it also. अब similarly Sharpe's ratio करना है, that is return on portfolio minus risk free rate divided by standard deviation. Find out the numbers. Right. So we are also done with Sharpe's ratio, and rankings have been once again 1, 2 and 3. Now we have to find out alpha. Now to work on alpha, we have to find out required rate of return of A, B and C. I'll guide you with A. So it is 6% plus 1.2 into 12 minus 6. Tell me. That is 6 plus 1.1 into 12 minus 6. And third is equal to 6 plus 1.3 into 12 minus 6. Tell me all the values.
सर 13.2 है फर्स्ट का.
13.2. फिर नेक्स्ट बताओ.
12.6.
हाँ, 12.6.
13.8.
13.8 करेक्ट. अब उसको एक्चुअल रिटर्न से कंपेयर करो. सो 15 माइनस 13.2. चलो कितना आ रहा है आंसर?
1.8.
1.8. ये प्लस है, पॉजिटिव. सो दैट इज गुड. 14 minus 12.6. 1.4. That is also positive, but ranked number 2. And third is minus
Minus
0.8.
0.8.
This is negative, so this is ranked third. So this is how we can work on trainer, Sharpe and alpha's ratio. Now these are very important in our examination. So yes, expecting you to remember this precisely.